and my colleague will make sure it gets to you. Let's do one question and a quick follow-up, as I'm going to keep it to the 20 minutes. We have a plane to catch.
Hi, Governor. Jane Tabor from the Globe and Mail. You said that you welcomed Mr. Flaherty's announcement today about mortgage changes. Right. There's a report that you were involved, that you had suggested those changes. Is that true?
Well, as has been the case for a number of years, federal authorities, which means the Superintendent of Financial Institutions, obviously the Department of Finance, CMHC itself, and the Bank of Canada have been following the situation with household debt and in the housing market very closely. We've always cooperated, open discussions about potential vulnerabilities in the sector and potential measures that could be taken. And as you're aware, these measures, which we do very much welcome, are the fourth in a series of measures that the federal government has taken, which we think have been both appropriate and timely. They've been put into place at the right time. So
you didn't answer my question.
No, I answered the question in the sense of, yes, we're involved in these discussions, but that's normal course. That's the way the system works, is that there's a broad consultation, and we meet regularly, as you would expect us to, Jane.
And did it happen today, or the announcement was made now, because of the overheated condo market in Toronto?
These measures don't affect one specific sector of the market, and in fact, you can look at some of them, and they the sort of higher end measures, the $1 million type measure, the ending of mortgage insurance for $1 million plus properties. I mean, that's not relevant to the core element of, for example, the Toronto or Vancouver condo market. So I wouldn't say the timing is driven. I mean, by that. Ultimately, just to be clear, there's a process, as there should be, and there would be in good times when there's vulnerabilities or when there's not, where there's sharing of information perspectives between the bank, the Department of Finance, OSFI, CMHC. Under the Bank of Canada Act, obviously, I consult regularly with the Minister of Finance on a range of issues, and that will happen. The final decisions, though, are the decision of the Minister of Finance. Absolute specific questions related to these should go to him. But the core point: officials are cooperating. These are timely and appropriate measures, and we very much welcome them.
Okay, we'll go to Chris Fournier, Bloomberg.
Governor Carney, Craig Alexander of TD said today that the changes from Minister Flaherty's mortgage rules are worth about the equivalent of 1 percentage point of tightening. In addition, the OSFI rule changes are worth another percentage point. Do you agree with that analysis? Why or why not?
No, is the short answer. And I'm not going to go into great detail, except to draw the attention that we're looking at different issues. These measures are to ensure the sustainable evolution of the Canadian housing market and, importantly, finances of Canadian household finances of Canadians. These are issues that are first and foremost financial stability issues, and so these are measures that are very well suited to specific vulnerabilities, specific risks in the Canadian economy, which relate first and foremost to financial stability. And I'm not going to be pulled into a monetary policy discussion which is targeted at price stability by a clever phrasing of a question. Okay?
Okay. We've got Reuters coming up next here.
Hi, Richard Woodbury with Reuters. In light of the mortgage announcement today, do you feel less pressure to use monetary policy as a way of curbing household debt?
We welcome these measures. They're timely. They're appropriate. They are, as you know, the fourth in a series of measures that the government has taken. There have been other measures that have been taken by OSFI, which will contribute and are contributing to the appropriate evolution of household finances in Canada. The housing market is an important component of the Canadian economy, but it's about 7% of the Canadian economy, and we take that into account in analyzing the overall evolution of economic activity in Canada, and that with global factors on the evolution of outlook for prices. So it's a bigger issue than one issue.
Hi, Ross Lord with Global National TV. Let's try to hit the nail on the head, unless I missed it. What's the downside if the federal government hadn't taken these measures today?
Well, we have, as the bank has said and emphasized in recent months, that the number one risk, domestic risk, to the Canadian economy is the potential for household finances to evolve in an unsustainable fashion, and that would have deleterious effects on the economy once the full burden of those debts were realized. In other words, in a more normalized environment. So that's the number one risk. These measures reduce the number one risk, domestic risk to the Canadian economy. The principal risk to the Canadian economy is at the present time arise from events in Europe and potential events in Europe. But so these risks, these measures, and the measures which have come before, and the measures that have been taken separately by OSFI, and the measures that have been taken in the conduct and governance of CMHC, some of those are targeted at the number one domestic risk, and that's why we very much support these moves.
Follow-up is, how much consideration have you given, or would you advise the federal government to give, to regulating things like car loans and credit cards?
The evolution of we look at it in, there are a variety of reasons why somebody might regulate something, consumer protection, access, other aspects, financial stability is how we look at these situations. I wouldn't say that we see in either of those sectors any developments which call into question financial stability in Canada. I'm not commenting on those other factors. I'm not informed enough on those other factors. But when we scan where there are potential risks to financial stability in Canada and ultimately the economic and financial welfare of Canadians, the issue has been centered in household debt as a whole and in debt related to housing and housing finance.
Steve Puttycombe from CBC. In reference to the minister's announcement today, to what degree does this show the government is being forced to use regulation to counteract the effects of low interest rates?
It's important that the sector as a whole is the housing sector, and underwriting standards are prudent for the circumstances, and I think the sense of the global interest rate environment as well as the policy interest rate is such that it is prudent to ensure that those standards are well constructed and adjusted as appropriate. I don't see. Well, I won't speak for the government in the conduct of this, but the adjustments being made have been more focused on coming to what is a equilibrium type level of these standards, as opposed to responding to certain movements or not in interest rates.
How would you like to see it work if you had the choice?
How would I? Well, I think that one can write an academic paper which says that you would vary these every day with adjustments in different market variables. That's not a reasonable way to run the world. Might get you an A on your paper, but as often is the case, it's not the right way to run the world. So how we'd like to see it, I think that the general trend here, which is to move to prudent underwriting standards and mortgage insurance standards for the medium term, for the long term, is exactly how we would like to see it, and is entirely in the spirit of what's being done. So these are, again, I know I'm repeating myself, but I'm basically being asked the same question. These are appropriate, they're prudent, they're timely, and they will contribute to, along with other measures that have been taken, they will contribute to reducing what is the number one domestic risk in our economy.
Winston Casey with the Telegraph Journal. I'd like to ask you more of a regional question. You mentioned the need for tax competitiveness, infrastructure investment. You gave the speech in a region where taxes are very high relative to the rest of Canada. There is not a lot of investment. Is this region doing enough to fuel the growth that you're talking about?
Well, I don't want to preach to governments on areas for which we're not responsible. I'll make the general observation that what is needed in picking up on what we've been discussing, which is the evolution of household finances by definition, and as a consequence, spending on housing, spending on household consumption. One would expect that the pace at which those have been running, household consumption, household investment, is going to moderate. It's been moderating, and this is helping the measures of the government and others, helping a sort of prudent evolution there. So where's the sources of growth? It increasingly relies on business investment, ultimately exports. In a global environment where you have to compete fiercely for both, and different regions, different countries can determine what their value offering is between human capital, between tax competitiveness, between infrastructure that pre-exists. But there has to be, in a very competitive global environment, an intense focus on creating, I'll call it an enabling environment to get that investment in order to continue with the growth.
So all the forecasts for this region are 2% growth and below that for, like, to say the maritime provinces, which is below the rest of the country. So would this region have to do more on, say, the tax end to fuel growth as opposed to other provinces?
Well, again, I don't want to prescribe a specific measure to an elected government. Some of the challenges in the region are demographic. The contribution on the labor force side are less here than they are in other parts of some other parts of Canada. I would remind you, though, that the trend rate of growth in Canada, or the bank's estimate of trend rate of growth in Canada, is 2.1% at present. So 2% type growth is Canadian average growth. Now, there's quarters where we'll be higher and lower than that, and that doesn't mean that we as a nation or the maritime region shouldn't aspire to more. But that's going to come. It is going to come from an enabling environment for investment if it's going to come.
On a à peu près 7 minutes ici, monsieur. La prochaine, et on a 2 autres aussi. Merci.
Monsieur Carney, bonjour.
Bonjour.
Jean-Albert Maire, Radio-Canada. Dans votre discours version française, vous parlez bien sûr du logement qui représente une part exceptionnellement élevée de l'ensemble de l'économie canadienne. Bon, le fédéral a réagi contre ça à nouveau hier. Mais on est dans une région où, vous le savez peut-être, il y a eu beaucoup de construction de logements. On parle de milliers de logements ou de maisons à Halifax ces années dernières. En même temps, on a une région où les coupures du fédéral vont se faire sentir parce qu'on a beaucoup d'emplois fédéraux aussi, des emplois bien payés. La conjugaison de ces deux, réduire la construction et moins d'emplois fédéraux, ne pensez-vous pas que ça pourrait avoir un effet dépressif sur la région?
C'est plutôt une question d'une évolution soutenable du secteur de logement et des dettes des Canadiens et des gens de Nouvelle-Écosse ici. Alors c'est plutôt une question d'une croissance soutenable. Une croissance soutenable du secteur de logement, une croissance soutenable de la région, par conséquent. Alors, s'il y a une légère modération d'activité, c'est une bonne chose afin d'avoir une croissance, comme je viens de dire, plus soutenable.
Et aussi
dans l'ensemble. Parce que le risque est un choc dans l'avenir de taux de croissance à l'échelle canadienne.
D'accord. Et cette région, vous le savez, est aussi exportatrice. Dans le passé, beaucoup de bois, aujourd'hui des produits de la mer, du homard notamment, qui a une forte valeur, et d'autres aussi.
Ouais.
Vous savez que le dollar nous pose des problèmes depuis très longtemps. Vous parlez de croissance. Quelle est la solution pour que notre région, si on freine l'emploi fédéral, si on freine l'immobilier, ait de la croissance avec un dollar aussi élevé?
Oui, mais la vigueur persistante du dollar canadien existe depuis quelques années et nous avons, depuis hier, nous avons eu, la Banque du Canada a eu plusieurs conversations avec des sociétés cette région. Et l'histoire est la même dans chaque cas. Chacune investit afin d'améliorer, d'augmenter leur productivité. Et chaque fois, il réussit. Nous avons vu ici, dans cette région, une forte augmentation de la productivité des sociétés. Dans le secteur d'alimentation, c'est un bon exemple. C'est un très bon exemple, surtout dans le secteur d'énergie. Alors, et c'est une question d'investissement et, premièrement, c'est une question si je peux dire, de recentrer sur les marchés qui vont être de plus en plus importants, c'est-à-dire des marchés émergents. Les problèmes ici au Canada, en ce qui concerne les exportations, c'est plutôt, c'est pas au fond, c'est pas une question du niveau de dollar, c'est une question de la faiblesse de nos marchés traditionnels, surtout les États-Unis. D'accord.
OK, la prochaine. On a à peu près 3 minutes. Peut-être une autre 2 questions. Je pense que normalement après, madame.
Oui, M. Carney, comment se porte l'économie dans la région ici?
Oui, probablement vous le savez, mais pendant la récession, la grande récession mondiale, l'économie ici se portait mieux que la plupart du Canada à cause de la grande investissement dans le secteur énergie et quelques d'autres facteurs. Depuis la récession canadienne, cette économie, la croissance ici était plus modeste. Et à ce moment-ci, l'économie est dans une période de transition parce que tout le monde le sait, il y a des grands projets. Il y a le grand contrat de navires canadiens. Il y a quelques grands projets d'énergie qui existent et qui offrent des possibilités, des occasions ici. Mais à ce moment-ci, c'est un taux de croissance un peu plus modeste que celui du Canada, de la reste du Canada, pardon. Et alors, les questions, et la question fondamentale, c'est une question d'investissement. Et c'est surtout une question d'investissement privé.
Vous êtes optimiste pour l'avenir?
La banque est réaliste pour l'avenir, mais cette région et le Canada, nous avons beaucoup d'atouts, beaucoup d'avantages. Et c'est mieux d'être Canadien à ce moment-ci qu'une citoyenne de notre pays, n'importe quel pays avancé. Nous sommes dans une transition fondamentale et de temps en temps difficile à l'échelle mondiale, mais il y a des grandes occasions et le Canada, dans l'ensemble, le Canada est fort. Alors oui, nous sommes réalistes, mais vous pouvez sentir un peu d'optimisme dedans.
You've got Nirmala, one question, just so we can get one behind you, okay?
Governor, I'll just combine all my questions then.
Okay.
Are you not concerned that the mortgage rules might hit domestic demand just when exports are going to hurt from slowing global economy? And also, Mr. Bernanke said yesterday that he acknowledged that he was too optimistic, and the Fed cut its forecast. Looking at your figures now, were you also too optimistic? I mean, you're looking at 2.4% this year and next. What are the downside risks to that?
There's obviously a couple questions there. One is what's important, as I said before, is the sustainable evolution of the housing market. It does no good to have artificial strength in the housing market or in consumption. and that the measures the government has taken, announced today, and the measures they've taken in the past, along with OSFI, will support a sustainable evolution of household debt and the housing market, and that is a good thing for Canada. It is a good thing for the evolution of growth in Canada, and it will result in a more sustainable building of prosperity in this country. So that's the core. In terms of our forecast, as you know, Nirmala will have the pleasure of meeting again in Ottawa in about 3 weeks' time, I think, when we will unveil our new forecast, which we're in the process of working through. Since our previous forecast in April, there has been a further slowing of global activity, including marginally in the United States. And the first quarter was somewhat weakened, so just arithmetically, what that means for 2012 growth in Canada, it would on the margin be down. But we've got to look through to the outlook for 2013, 2014, all in an environment, just to make our job difficult, of considerable global uncertainty given events in Europe. So, but we'll wrap it all up in a nice, neat package in both official languages, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the 17th, 18th. Thank you. 18th of July. Last question, sorry.
Janet Whitman with All Nova Scotia.
Right.
And I understand you've been here for a few days meeting with people in the region. Just wondering if you're encouraged. And then also, given that a lot of the overheating in the housing market has not been here,
right,
do those new restrictions sort of hurt here when...
to the contrary, what that means is that the restrictions avoid potential potential excesses in the housing market here. So it's a problem that wouldn't necessarily have developed, a vulnerability that wouldn't necessarily have developed in the region. To your first question, yes, I would say we were encouraged. My colleagues in Governing Council and the board were encouraged by discussions with local business leaders. The adjustment to the strength of the dollar has been a big issue over the last several years, but there has been dramatic improvements in productivity that have made a difference. The scale and scope of the effort to develop new export markets, whether it's in ranging from seafood to seaweed, to fertilizers to aerospace. The broader benefits of the scale of resource investment that's happening in the region, the spillovers from the Labrador Trough investment that also benefit here, the scale obviously of the big ticket shipping contract, but also some of the energy projects as well. There are a lot of quite positive things happening. Layered next to them, there's some well-known challenges, which include demographics and just the fact that the global economy is a more challenging place as well. And like every other region in Canada, Atlantic Canada needs to continue to refocus its energies, its export markets, in a way that we haven't had to do collectively for a century. Ultimately, it's a very positive thing because there's going to be much more diversity and opportunity in the global economy for Atlantic Canada and for Canada. So yes, the short answer is yes, encouraged, but and the last point on it really would be encouraged also by the sort of realism of the scale of the challenge and the time frame it would take.
And we're going to have to end it there. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a great afternoon.